everyone, and welcome to episode 9 of the Live Proud podcast, presented in partnership with Elysian Brewing, the official craft beer of Evil Geniuses. My name is Erin Ashley Simon, and today we are celebrating transgender and non-binary pride. I have two amazing and impactful individuals within the esports and gaming space. Now, I'm gonna let the two of them introduce themselves because they have done so many things across the landscape, and I'm gonna start with Amanda first. Amanda, great to have you.
Hey everyone, I'm Amanda Stevens. I am the Diversity and Inclusion Manager for Enthusiast Gaming. I help out with all of our editorial departments to make sure that we're doing diverse and inclusive content. And when I'm not doing that, you've probably seen me doing things with various esports orgs around Pride, as well as working with Lifeline to make sure that they have really good stream charity projects like Transitional Combat, our fighting game series, and we just wrapped up Trans Week of Visibility last month for, Trans Day of Visibility. I was trying to figure out how is the other way to say that, and I was like, there is none. All right, we're just gonna have an awkward transition.
No worries at all. You've done an amazing job with the fundraiser part. I know myself and various different people were involved in it, so Amanda, kudos to you. And our second guest.
Hey, I'm Kendryx. I am the Chief Operating Officer at Queer of Esports. And when I'm not trying to fight crime and make esports more inclusive, I am the head of digital over at esports.gg and also the marketing and partnerships coordinator at Tyrus TV, which is a talent agency. And beyond that, I don't really know what else. I'm just trying to make esports more inclusive one day at a time.
Hey, fighting crime, doing it in style as well. So, of course, the first question I have to ask you two, because, this is a good introduction that anyone will be able to come across when it comes to you professionally and personally. So, first question, and I want to start with Kendryx. How did you get into gaming? What was your beginnings, and what was it? A specific game? Was it working an event? How did you end up where you are?
So gaming wise, I started gaming when I was a kid. My dad was a big gamer and is a huge gamer still. And so I would fall asleep to him playing Total War, medieval Total War. And so I always wanted to do what he was doing. I was one of those kids. And so I kind of didn't really gracefully jump into gaming. I went to the R-rated, let's kill medieval battlefields type of gaming, and then went backwards into Nintendo and The Sims, and of course everyone's favorite Roller Coaster Tycoon, and then just progressively worked through my titles as I got older. My entry into esports was a little bit different. So my boyfriend at the time played Dota 2 on the TV screen when we were in university, and because he would play it with all his friends, I would watch. I'm like, oh my God, this game is so cool. I just want you to keep playing this. And he's like, I have to go to school. And I'd be like, no, you got to play. He's like, no, I really do have to go to school. So I basically found out that there was this game called Dota 2 and I could play it myself. And not only that, there was this competitive scene. And I kind of fell in love with the competitive aspect of it because I was a semi-professional athlete when I was in high school. So for me, that competitive edge and that competitive nature really came out by watching other pros do this amazing game that truthfully I got addicted to. And after watching it since about 2011, 2012, by 2014, I decided that I wanted to start making content because all the things that I saw in the NFL and in hockey, yes, I'm from Canada, so hockey's huge here, all those interviews with the players behind the scenes and getting to know them, I didn't really quite see that in Dota yet, so I kind of made it my mission to go out there, go to events, and do those interviews that I didn't see. And then eventually I just kind of merged my non-gaming stuff, so I've been working with social media and marketing for a very long time, and then kind of went, I'm good at esports, I'm good at journalism, I'm good at understanding what gamers want with my prior knowledge of marketing and esports, and then just made them go together. So it was really nice where I am now because I started when I got into esports being this is toxic, people are not very accepting, women are marginalized, out the yin yang. The comments I would get on my just an interview was atrocious. So it was nice to kind of remember how hard it was then and being one day I'll make this better for everybody, and to be in the position I am now where I can actually make those changes and create initiatives and create grants to give people those opportunities that I didn't have when I started.
Well, you definitely are making at least the steps towards the more active and impactful change in the industry. And Amanda, what about you? How did it all begin for you?
So I have 2 older siblings, and we used to play on the Nintendo and the Sega Genesis. And I remember either like playing like Altered Beast with my siblings, or Mortal Kombat, or we would play Street Fighter on the Nintendo, or Nintendo Track and Field, if any of you were like old enough to remember that game. And I figured out that you could jump off of the trackpad to have an infinite long jump. So my brothers would come, got home from like high school one day and was like, wait a second, how did you jump 2,000 yards? And I was like, don't worry about it. The screen says I did it, so I did it. And I've just always been involved in gaming, whether it was playing Magic the Gathering or playing various fighting games. And as far as like my entry into esports, it's 2-pronged. I had found out that like competitive, actual like competing in tournaments, fighting games was a thing, but also at the same time found out that the fighting games that I was playing wasn't the fighting games that they were playing. Like, I saw the Daigo parry happen, and I was like, that's... You can do that? Oh, okay. Or, like, seeing, like, infinite combos in, like, Marvel vs. Capcom and being like, I definitely am not playing the same Marvel vs. Capcom 3. I'm playing a different version of a video game than them. All right, cool. I don't have hands like this. I might as well not have hands. And then discovering League of Legends in Season 3, and got really deep into League, because you can play League at like a fairly high level and not have hands, which is good for people like me who don't have them. And also League, like being interested in sports, and I think like Dota and CSGO kind of share this as well, more so than I think fighting games do to an extent, reward you for just like having game knowledge, in so much that like you can understand football or soccer or hockey at like a very high level, but not be able to play it, but still like be able to coach, right, and like cover the sport. And it's the same thing for a lot of esports, which is how I got into it. I was like, I understand why they're doing X, Y, and Z, but you're never going to catch me like Flash Lisa and Ultimate somebody into the enemy team. That's like not happening. Again, you need hands. These are VR, right? They're not actually here. So that's how I got into esports, was wanting to take the really, really high-end information that goes on and trying to like disseminate it to like the bronze players that I knew.
Yeah, and oh my god, it's so funny you mentioned hands. Like, I'm a soccer player. I wish my hands were better.
Soccer player too. That's why I don't have hands, right? We use our feet.
I know, right?
Yo,
I know. We need an esport for feet.
When there's a feet keyboard, Erin, we're gonna dominate.
Oh, it's over. We're going pro. It's over, and then no one's been able to compete with us. But that's amazing to hear, just the different respective pathways that the two of you have taken in this industry. Now, obviously, with this podcast, we want to celebrate, and of course, we're going to address some of the obstacles and challenges. But I also want to take the time for all of us to celebrate the positive sides and the positive people within this industry. So I want to ask, who or what organization do you feel has had a positive impact or introduction when it came to either you personally or when it came to supporting the trans community as well as the non-binary community?
I think for me, definitely when I was getting into esports, there wasn't really anybody like that. It was just more like people were interested in me, right? Like as a person. I think nowadays, and I mean, it's kind of like a self-plug, right? But I think that like Trans Lifeline, especially with like launching peer-to-peer, which was, I mean, now that Twitch has more tags, is kind of a weird thing to have both. But like Trans Lifeline, I think, is doing a lot of really cool stuff by partnering with trans people in the gaming community, whether it be through streaming or people like myself in esports, to like let trans people know, one, hey, if you're already really into gaming and stuff, like here are some really cool trans content creators to work with. And if you didn't know anything about esports or gaming, Trans Lifeline is like, hey, well, you already want to support trans folks, so like here's trans folks doing gaming and esports stuff. So I think that that's like self-plug, right? That's really great. I also think that just like in general, I think things are just pretty dope nowadays. I think a lot of people who are involved in esports now are much more willing to, as they say, like get political. For example, there's the R6, there's Rainbow Six Siege desk analyst that's trans, and when a former pro decided to be rude to them on Twitter, it was kind of cool to see pretty much a large part of the professional side of the R6 community be like, hey, you know how we named that that spot on the map after you? Yeah, we're just gonna stop saying that now. Like, be gone. You're irrelevant now. Good job. So like that type of stuff used to not happen when I first got into esports, of like professionals in the industry being willing to make, as we say, political statements, telling people to just not be jerks. So yeah.
I kind of echo similar statements actually. When I got into esports, there wasn't the first group that I came across that was Dota specific was the Desoladies, and they were formed by a bunch of women who wanted to have like a safe community to basically queue up with, because Dota is canonically known to be very toxic. So they kind of like decided to like get together and invite people that they knew into it. So it was like an invite only, not exclusive, but just like invite only, because I needed to make sure that you were an okay person, essentially. That was my first introduction to like a group that was focused on making it a little bit better, but they didn't really do anything for the industry. It was just kind of like a nice little safe haven to go to. And back then there wasn't like, analysts didn't really stick up for people. People were pretty toxic in general. I'd say nowadays things are a little bit easier. Kind of like Amanda said, people are willing to get political. It's not really politics, but political. But like self-plug wise, I mean, also Queer Run of Esports does a lot. Like we have a pretty good community for a whole bunch of different titles, and we're doing a lot of initiatives to make sure it's safer and also just give back. That's one of the things I think as we move forward, we need to be more cognizant of like, what are we actually doing in the industry? Not just saying things are getting better. Like, what are we actually doing that's making it better? And I would also agree that Trans Lifeline is doing phenomenal things as well. So both very good orgs that I would recommend for anyone who needs a safe haven to go to.
Absolutely. Both orgs are doing an amazing job, and I see the impact financially when it comes to fundraising, on social media, and just honestly, I see both of you just all over the place speaking up, and for me that's so amazing to see. And you both are part of the progressive change that we're seeing in esports. But as you both mentioned, it wasn't always like that, and for a lot of youth who are in this industry, this is a period of time that they're going to be going through self-discovery, figuring out who they are. And so if you don't mind, can the two of you discuss like what was that self-discovery or self-journey professionally and personally through the lens of just your overall experience within esports and gaming?
I mean, for me personally, I was already out when I started working in esports, right? Because I didn't start working in esports proper until like 2015. And by then I was already, 27, 28? So like I like a lot of people get into esports like fairly young. I kind of didn't, in a sense. Like 27's not old, but it's like definitely skews older. So like I didn't really have a whole lot of the same stuff that I hear a lot of other queer folks who work in the industry of, like, you know, trying to both figure out their identity while also like how they fit into their professional sense. I more so had to deal with an industry that was fairly juvenile, or more juvenile than it is now. So like I've told this story a lot of, I've had pros and professionals tell me nowadays that the reason that they didn't do interviews with me or just like ghosted me was because I was trans. I've had people tell me to present that I would do better, I would go further if I just presented masculine, or if I like decided to like go the physical transition surgical route. Like if I did one of those two things, I've had people tell me to make my voice more feminine, if I wanted to be more successful on camera. And I'm doing pretty good for myself, not having done any of that. So that's really my advice to young folks, is you're going to feel a lot of pressure to like fit a certain way or be a certain presentation. But if you are just yourself and the stuff that you're saying is really good, and, you know, you bring some type of energy, you're gonna get somewhere. I mean, esports, like every job industry, is also a lot of like who you know and like how you interact with people, and less so like pedigree. So I'm not gonna say that like, oh yeah, like getting into esports is easy, but like being self-aware and self-assured is like way more important than, you know, looking a certain way or acting a certain way or what have you.
My journey is different than Amanda's. I personally went through, kind of like I talked about before, where I had very short hair as a young kid. So like I had a mullet until I was about 5 because my parents, for some reason, thought that was a good idea. So I had a mullet till I was 5, and then I had super short hair, and I hated wearing dresses. I hated wearing anything. Basically, if you could consider it feminine, I was like, please burn it in a trash bag. Like, I am never, ever going to wear it. And so I went through this awkward transition of looking very masculine, presenting very masculine, and like basically like playing all the sports, playing with all the guys, like being one of the guys. And so as a kid, I kind of internalized this idea of like, I didn't really understand what my gender was because I didn't really understand what people were verbally telling me and then how I felt inside. And so when I went into my teens, it was a lot easier to just present feminine. It was a lot easier to grow my hair out and wear the clothes that everyone wanted me to and like dress the way everyone else wanted me to. And it wasn't until, this is the sad part of the story, I almost died 4 years ago. And I basically realized that if I don't live my life the way that I want to live it, what's the point of even being here? And like, not in like a dark way, but just like you have to live the life that you want to live, not the life that everybody else wants you to live. So I went through like different transitions of like cutting my hair to certain lengths and playing around with clothing. And then last year, actually, after the launch of QWE, I like had this week where I was like, I really don't feel like I am like a woman. Like I don't think she, her fits me. I don't think that that's what I want. And so I very cautiously asked a very small group of friends, like very, very close friends. I was like, hey, can you just like for a little while just use they them with me, like just like, I don't know if that's what I want for sure, but like I really think that it feels good for me and I'd like to like not make it public but just play around with it. And so after the week I was like, yeah, most definitely, like this is exactly like, I'm non-binary. I don't want to exist within the the two binaries. I want to express myself however I feel that day or week or whatever. And so the transition for me was friends-wise was amazing. Everyone was very receptive. Everyone was like, yeah, you go, like, that's amazing. What do you want me to, like, use? Like, I have a niece, so I was like, what do you want me to call, like, aunt, uncle, like, where are we going to fit? And I was like, we'll come up with something cool, right? Professionally, though, I was met on one side with a team I was working with who ignored my emails about coming out, refused to call me by my pronouns, and made me feel that if I didn't step up to their standards, that I was not worthy of their attention, quite simply. And then I had other communities that I was working with who were like, yes, 100%, we're here for you. So it's hard for me to say that my esports transition has been easy because I was met with a lot of like harassment and belittling and just not accepting, versus other side, which was celebrating and like congrats, like you found who you are, that's amazing. And so I think that when I look at the last year, I can see that it's been really good but really hard. But I also think that in general esports is skewed younger and they do understand that things aren't as black and white as they seem. And so I feel like the younger generation is more accepting versus, like, I hate saying the boomers, but the boomers are like the ones who are sitting in the executive positions who are like, yeah, no, you look feminine, it's she, her. And that to me is where the divide really is.
Well, let's dive a little bit more into, you know, that it's not black and white. There are some gray areas. And, you know, I think, of course, there are levels of toxicity and trolls and people having inappropriate behaviors. But there are some people who I wouldn't necessarily, I mean, some instances it's ignorance. Some others is they are still in the process of learning because they're young. They don't come across different people, you know, even though as universal gaming is, some people still live in the bubble of where they live and who their friends are and everything. And so for you to, you know, what's that experience of dealing with someone who's in that gray area who may be ignorant or is learning still or may not know the right things to say, and how do you turn some of those moments into like positive teachable moments?
So Y'all both know my personal stance on this, and I'll share it with everybody else. I do this for a living, right? Like I talk about gender, sexuality, race, religion, and sort of like how all of that connects, intersectionality, for a living. That's what I do. When it comes to like dealing with people who may be like ignorant or don't understand, it depends on like that specific interaction. But I would like to tell all of the youths out there and all of the people who are just discovering themselves or know who they are and are dealing with people, you don't owe anybody any of your energy whatsoever. Most people who are ignorant, you taking the time to educate them is almost always a loss. And I know that doesn't always sound like the best thing, but a lot of times when people have bigoted thoughts, it is a feeling and not based on fact. And it's really, really hard to convince somebody that like a feeling that they have is incorrect. So for example, like if Erin's favorite ice cream is Rocky Road ice cream, right? And like she loves it. It's like the best ice cream in the world to her. If I come up to her and I'm like, yo, Erin, Rocky Road is trash. Like, here are all of these reasons why mint chocolate chip is a better ice cream. Like, composition, everything, right? Like, that's not going to change Erin's opinion on Rocky Road ice cream, right? Like, she's still going to like it. It's the same thing with a lot of bigotry. You could tell people, you know, trans people aren't perverts. You can tell them that, you know, there are no proven cases of trans people assaulting people in bathrooms, yada, 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 straight down the line, right? Like, you give them all the statistics and all the facts and everything. And at the end of the day, 80% of those people that you talk to are just not going to care about anything you tell them. So remember that you don't owe anybody your energy. And anyone who tells you that, like, oh, you should have turned that into a teachable moment or you should have used that as a point of education, you can just say, nah, fam, I don't get paid to be a teacher, and call it a day.
Yeah. I mean, listen, the mute and black button is your friend. And anyone, you know, and it's weird. We're in a period of time where people think dialogue includes being disrespectful. And no, like when you're disrespectful, like Amanda, you were saying, no one, you don't owe them anything. And, you know, the energy is if they expect anything back, it's like, well, you shouldn't have been disrespectful. You can have an actual dialogue and conversation. And Kendryx, on the other side, for people who are actively trying to learn and may stumble or mess up. I know we talked about this offline about, you know, it's about actually doing it. If someone says, this is my pronoun, this is who I am, respect it. And, you know, for some, it's a transitional period for everyone, right? How do you address when it's someone who has actively been learning on their own, has been trying and is afraid of, oh, I don't want to mess up because I don't want to disrespect this person who I respect?
I think for me, it's a lot about compassion, right? Like, it's understanding that people that are putting the effort in, like, even if somebody messes up with me and they're like, oh, hey, can you get her, whatever. I'm never really in a place where I'm like, yo, you effed up. Like, you should have known better. I'm like, they made the effort after they apologize and get, like, upset. Like, they're like, oh my gosh, like, I didn't mean to. I take that as, like, I care enough that I'm visibly upset that I've made you upset. And, like, that to me speaks more about the compassion than it is, like, being misgendered in that moment, because I don't think it's truly them trying to make me feel bad, especially when they have responses like that. So for me, it's celebrating the small victories. It's like, you know, if you have a friend who, like, is having a hard time keeping up or, like, is using the wrong pronouns and they finally do it, it's like, yo, I see you. You got there. And, like, making them feel like it's part of their process as well. I think when we think of transitions and we think about like for me, identifying as non-binary, the transition is not just my transition. It's the transition for everybody around me, and then peripherally everyone who knows them as well. So I try to, like, err on the side of compassion, and also just, like, those teaching moments to me are okay as long as they're not being a troll. Like, I'm not here to explain why I'm the way I am, but I'm here to explain how you can better respect who I am, right? It's like, I've had conversations with people on staff who are like, I really don't know how to use they, them. And they're not doing it because they're like, I'm not going to do it, which could have been the reaction. It's them saying, I really don't know how to do this. And then being like, hey, like, let's walk through some examples. Like, this is what I would say. This is what I say with friends who are non-binary. I give shortcut words to make it easier for them. So, like, I love the term NB. Not everybody does, but I do. So I'm like, if you ever get like struggle, or you want like a fun name to call me, like yo fam or friend or dude or man, like changing the language, use NB. That's a really fun way. Or like with partners, I've been like, you can call me they be instead of baby. Like, that's a really fun term that I like. And so it's taking those moments to like build the relationship and build the compassion between the two of you.
Yeah, and offline you mentioned about learning how to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. What does that phrase mean to you two individually?
I mean, I can go because it was my phrase, but it's learning that when you've messed up, regardless of if it's a racist comment, a homophobic comment, a slip up, a pronoun, whatever it is, when someone corrects you, it's learning to be uncomfortable, or learning to be comfortable with that uncomfortableness, right? Like, you want to be like, oh, I messed up, oh my God, and panic, but instead it's like sitting with it and being like, okay, where did I mess up? How did I mess up? And how can I show up better in the next situation? And instead of like default panicking and oh my godding and rushing everywhere and then just sometimes even ghosting, just learning to live with that and live with the anxiety spike, live with that little bit of panic that you get, and recognize that the panic means that it's a learning opportunity for you. It's a barrier, it's an obstacle that you're learning to overcome. Just like that first time you take a dive off of like, the 10, I used to be a diver. So like when you're on like the really high towers and you take your first jump and you get those nerves, learning to sit with those nerves, because it means you're trying something new and you're trying something to be better, right? And as long as your intentions are to be better, it's not to be worse, then I think we're in a good place.
Absolutely. Amanda, what about you? What does that phrase mean to you?
I mean, so I talk about this a lot, especially in my work capacity, that there are like 3 zones, right? There's green, which is, you're chill, you relax. There's orange, your chair might be a little wobbly, your drink is almost empty, and then like red, your chair is broken, you got no drink, and you were falling flat on your behind. A lot of times, when we're looking at like learning moments, people can't really learn very well either when they're in green or when they're in red. And the reason why that is because like when you're in green, you're super comfortable. You're not really looking to like get outside of your comfort sphere. So you're not actively looking to pursue things that you weren't already interested in. And that's where a lot of like learning about like racism, homophobia, transphobia, those type of things are. So if they're not already in your sphere, you're probably not going to learn about them when you're in the green. And when you're in the red, you're in that sort of like panic phase. You just really want to like be back in your like vibe, right? You just want to like get back to like sipping on your gin and juice and like be really happy about everything. The Knicks are winning the playoffs, all that type of stuff. So like where we always want to be when we're in these learning moments is in that orange, that like quick spike of uncomfortableness, because that's where we are most likely to absorb the information that's being told to us, as long as it's being told to us at our level. So when you hear somebody say, hey, don't say mongoloid, that's actually like a racist term, don't be like, well, I didn't know it wasn't racist. Just be like, huh, what do you mean by that? And then like just like Google or let this person educate you. A lot of times what we think when we hear, oh, you did a racist thing or you did something that's transphobic, is that we're saying that you're racist or that you're transphobic. And that's not usually what we're saying. What we're saying is that the action that you took is racist or transphobic. Because what happens is when people hear that, they think, well, oh, racists are bad people, transphobic people are bad people. I'm not a bad person. So that means if I'm not a bad person, I can't be racist. And so the thing I did can't be racist. And that's not how things work, right? So that's what we mean by being comfortable being uncomfortable. It's being able to recognize that the things that we do don't always define us, and that it's okay to make mistakes as long as we're willing to acknowledge those mistakes and grow from them.
Absolutely. And a lot of times whenever there's moments like that, it's like pause, breathe, and just relax, because we're in this period of time, especially when it comes to just the community within esports and gaming. It's very reactionary, right? Mm-hmm. And it's like sometimes you just got to step back and assess it by, okay, what is this person saying? Or, it's that uncomfortability level. It's like, it's not about you, it's about that person and them coming to you and talking to you. So you have to keep that in mind. And that part of that too, with being that uncomfortable level, is understanding that there are certain things that as part of normalizing, right? Normalizing introducing yourself with pronouns, normalizing people introducing their pronouns to you, and and not making assumptions and things like that. And I guess through your experience, what does it mean to normalize these things? I mean, obviously, people shouldn't make assumptions or generalizations at all about appearance, pronouns, or anything like that. But in terms of just your overall experience, like, what does it mean to normalize these kind of conversations?
I mean, so I have a really wild concept, which is that I tend to have started to err slightly away from doing the icebreaker of like saying name and pronouns. And there's a bit of a reason for this. Usually what happens is that these happen in spaces where people might be trans. And so it kind of like others that trans person if they don't really feel like being out. So I'm always mindful about like the type of spaces that I do the sort of icebreaker of like name, pronoun, whatever, is that I tend to make sure that when I'm using language that I just try to stick towards a middle ground and try not to use too many pronouns until someone says like, hey, these are mine. And that's just like, I work in very different spaces than you two do, right? Like I don't just work in esports and gaming. So like, there are different conversations that happen. I think that for esports and gaming, it's fine to keep doing the icebreaker name and pronouns. But just in general, just don't make a thing about it. For example, at Upcomer, which is what our EGs, Enthusiast Gaming, I realize that there are two EGs. At Enthusiast Gaming, Upcomer is our esports site. And in our Slack, I just strongly recommended that we use pronouns in our display names. And that way nobody has to out themselves. I made sure that I started with management. So the editors and the site lead, and then disseminated that to the rest of the staff. So that way no one's really like having to do this whole moment of like, oh, by the way, I'm non-binary. That's why it says they, them. It's just, oh, everybody else has their pronouns. There's a they, them there. I guess like if they want to tell me about that, that's their business, right? Or like myself, because I don't always present super feminine, so like, oh, she, her, cool, got it, done, right? It's just like doing that in a way that doesn't have to be some like big announcement. You just like, you started at management so that everybody else just follows suit.
I do basically the same thing. I got into a really good rhythm myself to just kind of use gender neutral terms in general when I speak about people, to make it less impactful, to normalize using it as well, because for me, I don't see many other non-binary individuals in the space. And so I just try to use gender neutral when possible to kind of like give the examples and show that it's like not something that's hard to do. And also like assuming things is just, there's a saying that I won't say it right now, but there's a really lovely saying of what assumptions do. And for me, I always lead in meetings with like, if I'm introducing myself, hey, I'm Kendryx, my pronouns are they, them. I do operate in different spaces than Amanda does. So for me, it normalizes it, and it also allows for people to take up that example. I've had many people, both in panels and in calls and just in like pitch meetings, where they're like, I've never thought about doing that, but it might make more sense if I do it in my spaces so that people can feel more comfortable. And I'm like, yeah, like cis individuals should be leading as well with it. It shouldn't just be those who need our pronouns to be respected, because for me, they might not match my outward appearance. And that's kind of why I do it a lot of the time, so that other people can lead by example as well. It's, if we're all doing something, we see a bigger change than the smaller individuals are doing it, right? So that's where I come from, at least.
Well, this conversation has been so enlightening. I mean, even I'm still learning, right? And I hope that everyone who's watching will be learning as well. Now, before we wrap it up, my last question is, for those who are part of the trans community or part of the non-binary community who are watching this and aren't quite sure, where do I find my community? Where can I find others like myself? Or even people who want to support, the transgender community as well as non-binary community? Where could they go about finding that community, finding that support, finding that group?
So I highly recommend using peer-to-peer, and I will make sure that y'all folks at Evil Geniuses have it for the show notes. It's basically a way to find streamers of a bunch of tags that don't exist on Twitch, whether it's trans, whether it's, demisexual, whatever. And it's not just sexuality and gender tags, it's religion tags, ethnicity tags. And this is just a great way to find really open and great Twitch streamers, which then means that you'll probably find a pretty great Twitch community through their stream. And then, of course, I'm always going to plug, if you ever feel like you're a trans person and you just like need someone to talk to, Trans Lifeline's hotline is amazing because it's only operated by other trans people. And so they know the type of things that you're going through. And we are functional both in Mexico, Canada, and the United States. And our Spanish hotline is up and running.
It's amazing. For me, I'd say, like, again, like Queer of Esports, title's a little bit of a misnomer, but like it is for everybody. I know that that's a place that I actually go to talk to other non-binary individuals about like struggles or things that I'm going through, language, all that kind of hard stuff that's sometimes not accepted. I also suggest that like reaching out to, like, if I know it's COVID, I'm not recommending people go do the things during COVID, but if you're in a city that has like a gay gaming community, Toronto has like the gay Toronto Gamers, Boston has one, New York, most metropolitans have some sort of queer gaming focused place. I recommend checking them out as well. That's a nice way to connect with your community as well. But also, like, I'm not someone's therapist, but like I am always open. My DMs are actually open. So like if you want someone or need someone to like direct you somewhere, I'm happy to. I know there's not many non-binary individuals in esports or gaming, so like happy to help and happy to direct if I can.
Well, Kendryx, Amanda, thank you so much for joining our episode today to drop information in terms of your experience, the industry, and where others can find supportive communities as a whole. Thank you. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in to the Live Proud podcast, episode 9, presented in partnership with Elysian Brewing. This episode is focused on transgender and non-binary pride. And we will have more in store that's shedding a light on more different communities all across esports and gaming in future episode. And remember, everyone, make sure to live with love, live loud, and live proudly. My name is Erin Ashley Simon, and we'll see you all again in the next episode.